Production of Swan Song is supported by viewers like you. Thank you. The next 2 episodes of Swan Song will cover 5 games in total. This episode will cover 3 completely unrelated games released in January of 2000, and the next episode will cover 2 games related to the manga Uzumaki, which released a month apart in February and March of 2000. This episode's games aren't super substantial, but as you'll see, I don't mean that in a necessarily derogatory way. With the current rate of 1 episode a month, I thought it would really suck if I released one of them a month for the next 3 months because they would be really short episodes. As for the Uzumaki games, unlike a franchise like Digimon where we can talk about how the franchise progressed between games released months apart, I think it's a lot harder to do that when both games are released a month apart. I think it would make for a more interesting video to treat them as 2 sides of the same coin instead of handling them as separate episodes, even though they're technically very distinct games. Batching these together will let us get to the spicier parts of the year 2000 WonderSwan lineup sooner, so I hope you'll appreciate the slight deviation in format. Thanks, and now we're going back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Oekaki magic.
Y2K's inaugural WonderSwan release was the absolutely adorable O-chan no Oekaki Logic. It was released on January 6, 2000, published by Sunsoft and developed by Santaclaus. Santaclaus used to be a Sunsoft internal development team prior to December of 1994, when they spun out into their own studio. After splitting from Sunsoft, they only ever released 5 games for the arcade and console markets, with this one being their final release. Following the release of O-chan no Oekaki Logic, Santaclaus pivoted towards development of Flash and Shockwave games for the web, and later pivoted again to smartphone games. Currently, their primary focus appears to be maintaining a baseball mobile game, Jukyu Koshien, which recently celebrated its 10th anniversary. Anyway, O-chan no Oekaki Logic is a spin-off of Sunsoft's hebereke series starring the titular O-chan character. Oekaki Logic, or Drawing Logic, is the generic Japanese name for the logic puzzles Nintendo calls Picross, or what we'd call nonograms more generically in English. These puzzles take place on a grid, with each row and column marked up with numbers. For example, in a 10 by 10 grid, if the row is marked as 3, 1, that means there will be 2 groups of filled-in tiles in that row, one which is 3 columns wide, and one that is 1 column wide. You can infer from this that 6 tiles will be blank, with at least one of them between both groups of filled-in tiles. The column hints work exactly the same way, so by combining the information from both sets of hints, you can start filling out tiles which form a predetermined image. These puzzles were invented in 1988 by Ishida Non, a graphics editor who had participated and won in a competition in which she had to create static art by turning skyscraper lights on and off. She had originally named them window art puzzles. In any case, the WonderSwan version we're looking at is a port of O-chan no Oekaki Logic 2, Color mo arimasu wa, for the Sony PlayStation, which was originally released all the way back in September of 1996. The PlayStation version's big defining feature was the addition of colored nonogram puzzles, which weren't a part of the prior game. Naturally, the WonderSwan version doesn't have these as the game is played entirely in grayscale, but it does feature all 300 regular nonogram puzzles from that version. What I didn't expect was that the WonderSwan version would come across as the most polished installment in the series. The first 2 PlayStation games were released very early in the system's life and feel really rough around the edges because of it. And the third game, released in 2001, pretty much only amounted to a new puzzle pack with all of the old jank from the past games. You can feel the tiny budget this game got a lot more on PlayStation than you can on WonderSwan, and even with the absence of color puzzles, it just feels like the definitive release of this game. Nonograms are also just something that feel particularly well suited to the reality of handheld systems. They're captivating enough to let you zone out and chill, but even though you're being timed throughout a puzzle, they're low pressure enough that you won't feel bad if you're being interrupted by the world around you. This is what I meant when I said games not being super substantial wasn't inherently derogatory. Sometimes the best games are just well-executed simple ideas that help distract you from the world on fire around you, and O-chan no Oekaki Logic definitely knocks that one out of the park. I highly recommend it to all WonderSwan fans. Also released on January 6, 2000 was Dokodemo Hamster, a virtual pet game for the WonderSwan developed and published by Interbec. Dokodemo Hamster is a 5-game series which started with this game on the WonderSwan. The first and third games are exclusive to the WonderSwan and the rest are exclusive to the PlayStation, which is definitely a little bit odd. This series was also given a manga serialization by Nekobe Neko in the famous shoujo manga magazine Nakayoshi from September of 2000 to March of 2002, covering the period between the release of Dokodemo Hamster 2 to the last entry in the series. At its core, Dokodemo Hamster is a virtual pet game. You've got a view of your hamster in their cage, and as time passes, you'll need to ensure that it sleeps, eats, and lives in a clean cage. Keeping your hamster happy and properly cared for will unlock short animations of them doing a special trick or dance, and the ostensible goal of the game is to collect them all in a gallery which is available through the system menu. Everything in this game is incredibly cute. But there's a twist, this isn't just a virtual pet game, it's also a communication game. You and your hamster can communicate back and forth in 2 different ways, talking and mail. Talking to your hamster largely consists of selecting questions or statements from a predetermined list, which the hamster will react to with cute animations. But your hamster can also write you letters. That's right, your hamster somehow knows how to write in Japanese and pulls out a tiny desk every once in a while to compose a letter to you that shows up in your mailbox. More often than not, these are questions to get to know you better, influencing what kind of follow-up letters you'll get in the future. What ties these 2 elements together is a special option in the talking menu. You can teach your hamster new vocabulary words that they can use when writing letters to you. You can enter in a new word and assign it to defined categories and subcategories of words so that your hamster can make proper use of the word in their letters to you. Everything in this game is really cute, but I don't think that there's a ton of longevity here. If you play this for any longer than 5 to 10 minutes, I get the feeling that you'll quickly exhaust whatever content is in this game. If a key point of your game is the novelty of receiving letters from my hamster, I probably shouldn't be getting duplicate letters in the first 15 minutes of gameplay. While it's nice that everyone's letters are going to be customized with their own vocabulary words, it's hard to see it as anything other than Mad Libs tacked onto a very primitive virtual pet game. It's incredibly charming and cute, so I totally get why people would get drawn to it because of that, but there isn't much substance here otherwise. Here's hoping that Dokodemo Hamster 3 will turn out better. And to close out this episode, we've got the 3rd and final entry in the Touryuumon series of table game adaptations for the WonderSwan, Gomoku Narabe Reversi Touryuumon. It was developed and published by Sammy and released on January 13th, 2000. While previous Touryuumon games were focused on a single table game, Mahjong or Shogi, this games box proudly calls this one a 2-in-1 deal by bundling 2 vaguely related games, Gomoku and Reversi. Gomoku is a strategy board game which is played with Go pieces on a 15x15 board, where players must alternate placing stones of their color on empty intersections on the board to create an unbroken horizontal, vertical, or diagonal line consisting of exactly 5 pieces. It's really that simple. Gomoku Narabe literally translates to 5 pieces in a row. Reversi, or more specifically Othello, the most played Reversi rule set, is a similar game played on an 8x8 board. Like Gomoku, players alternate putting pieces of their color on the board, but they are placed inside of a tile instead of the intersections of the board grid. When players play a piece, any of the opponent's pieces forming a straight line between the played piece and another piece of the same color are flipped so they all become the same color. Once the last empty square is filled with a piece, whichever player has the most pieces in their color wins. There isn't really much else to say about this game, they're just competently executed adaptations of these games for a digital format. Like past Touryuumon games, these have pretty basic menus but a nice and clean interface once you're in any given game. I've always sucked at both of these games, so during my capture session I never actually managed to win any of these games once, even on the easiest difficulty. It's really hard to tell if I'm just too stupid to enjoy these games or if the AI is obnoxiously hard, so I'll let you be the judge of that. Hopefully now you understand why I didn't want to slow roll these games over the next 3 months. I'm struggling to come up with anything else to say about this one, so let's just end it here for now.